The year is 50 AD. It's been a few years since the Romans finalised their conquest of southern Britain. With victories at the River Medway, skirmishes at the Thames River, and finally the siege of Camulodunum, southern Britain was slowly being integrated into the Roman Empire. Yet one man was still resisting Roman rule. Caractacus, leader of the Catavaloni tribe, was still a thorn for the Romans to deal with, as in every encounter the Romans failed to capture or kill him. Caractacus' resistance to Rome began in the summer of 43 AD, as the Romans invaded southern Britain from Kent, under the pretext of aiding the displaced Trinovantes tribe. The real reason was the emperor at the time, Claudius, needed to prove his worth, as the start of his reign was tentative, as he secured the throne through bribes and by being the first emperor to be proclaimed by the powerful Praetorian Guard. The initial invasion of Britain went smoothly for the Romans, as victories at the River Medway, the death of Tagomas at the River Thames, and the capture of the Catavalonians' capital, Camulodunum, all in the same year. Yet, in all of these instances, Caractacus evaded the Romans each time, and despite being displaced from his tribe, still managed to secure the support from other tribes around Britain. With the Romans now securing his former homeland, Caractacus headed west towards Cymru, modern-day Wales, in 44 AD. And thanks to his status of being an enemy of Rome, found support amongst the tribes in the area. Now with more troops at his disposal, Caractacus began a campaign of guerrilla tactics, hitting any Roman incursion that strayed too far away from Roman-occupied lands. These tactics continued for the next few years, and in 46 AD the governor of Britain, Aulus Plautius, was replaced by Publius Astorius Scapula. Upon Scapula's arrival in Britain, most of the south as far as modern-day Bournemouth was under Roman control, with the rest controlled by tribes loyal to Rome. Yet, in the west of Britain, many tribes took the opportunity of a new governor to attack Roman fortifications, and as it was the winter of 46 AD, the tribes didn't expect Scapula to launch any incursions into their own territories. They were, of course, wrong. Scapula wasted no time gathering an army, and during early 47 AD attacked various tribes and any enemy forces. These attacks were so successful as most of the resistance was crushed and unable to form any new forces. Even the Iceni tribe, which initially allied themselves with Rome, rose up, but were quickly subdued at one of their hill forts near modern-day Cambridge. Despite this uprising, the Iceni tribe were allowed to keep their independence, under the condition that the king of the Iceni tribe made Rome one of his co-heirs. Now, with most tribes in Rome's sphere of influence tamed, Scapula focused his legions west towards the Welsh tribes. The Silures and the Ordovices were both under Caractacus' control. These back-and-forth attacks by Caractacus continued for a few years, with little results, as the Britons could only harass then retreat, due to the fact they simply didn't have the numbers to occupy or maintain a garrison any further than their own territories. Moving forward into 49 AD, Scapula devised a strategy of building several forts along the west of Roman-occupied land, encompassing modern-day locations such as Gloucester and Longthorpe. At some point, Scapula split his legions. One legion was sent north of Gloucester towards modern-day Shropshire to establish further forts in an attempt to cut Caractacus off from any incursions into Roman lands, while the rest of the legions were used to build forts at Kingholm, Gloucester. Meanwhile, Caractacus in 50 AD marched his troops towards Gloucester, in the hopes of catching them off guard. hoping that the reduced Roman force would be defeated. Yet this attack was repulsed, sending Caractacus back towards Wales. With the Northern Legion establishing more and more forts along the north, cutting off a potential escape route for Caractacus, he began to retreat back towards the Welsh hills, yet Scapula was on his tail after the attack at King's Holm. While in pursuit, Scapula called the Legion in the north to rendezvous with him, hoping to finally catch Caractacus in the open and put an end to his resistance. Caractacus knew he couldn't retreat further, as he feared he would be run out of Wales and would lose the allegiance of the tribes that followed him. Knowing he couldn't avoid a pitched battle, Caractacus then searched for an ideal battleground. The location of the battle isn't certain, as several locations have been suggested, despite there being a modern location called Caer Caradoc Hill, where the remains of an Iron Age fort exists, but for the sake of the video we will go with that location. The battlefield Caractacus chose was the ideal terrain for his numbers, as he was most likely outnumbered and needed to negate this disadvantage. At the same time, he needed to create a problem for the Romans to actually attack his troops, hence the reason he chose a narrow high hill near a river, in order to create the maximum amount of problems and obstacles to disable his troops' weaknesses. Now, with his battle plan in place, Caractacus waited for the Romans to arrive. Scapula soon reached Caractacus' location, and upon seeing the obstacles that his troops would have to overcome, felt disheartened and feared he would lose many men in the assault. Yet his troops rallied him to order the assault, as they knew they would be able to defeat Caractacus once and for all. The Romans fielded an army of around 20,000 men, including legionnaires from the prestigious 9th Legio Hispania, as well as several thousand auxiliary troops. Caractacus' troops were slightly less, between 10,000 and 15,000 lightly armoured Britons. The first phase of the battle began with Scapula ordering his auxiliary troops to cross the river and secure the other side, in order for his legionnaires to cross safely, as the auxiliaries were equipped with light armour and would have a much easier time crossing. Caractacus had placed some skirmishers at the base of the hill, near the river, whom then began pelting the crossing auxiliaries with spears and other projectiles. The crossing troops returned fire as more gradually crossed onto the other side. Yet the auxiliaries were slowly taking casualties. Yet their superior discipline and morale enabled them to hold the line and provide a safe passage for the remaining legionnaires to cross. The Britons continued to hail down projectiles rather than charge down an attack. This showed that Caractacus had installed discipline into his men. The auxiliaries managed to hold the line until the legionnaires finished crossing, at which point the auxiliaries retreated and reformed, while the legionnaires moved to engage the Britons upon the steep hill. The Britons at the base of the hill fell back towards the ramparts on top of the hill, at which point the Romans adopted one of their signature formations, the testudo. This formation was widely used when the legionnaires had to deal with a sustained barrage of missile fire. They would form into a turtle shape to protect all sides of their advance. With this tactic in place, nearly all missile fire the Britons launched had little to no effect on the advancing Romans. And before long, the legionnaires had reached the British ramparts and began tearing them down. With no more defences protecting them, the Britons had to fight the Romans in bloody close combat. But thanks to the Roman superior equipment, training and experience, the lightly armoured Britons couldn't hold out for long and were rapidly being pushed back. The auxiliary units that had fallen back and reformed soon returned to the fray, and began flanking the Britons on each side. Now being attacked on 3 sides, the Briton army broke and fled, yet were hounded by the lightly armoured auxiliaries. This was a complete victory for the Romans, as most of the Britons were either captured or killed. Caractacus' family, including his wife, children and brother, were captured. Yet once again Caractacus escaped, but we don't know how, yet he didn't get far as he retreated towards the lands owned by the Brigantes near modern-day Yorkshire, but was soon imprisoned by the leader of the tribe, Cartamandua, as she had pledged loyalty to Rome and knew giving the Romans Caractacus would prove her allegiance. Now finally captured, Caractacus was sent to Rome to be the main attraction in the triumph parade. Shortly after his arrival, Caractacus was allowed to converse with the Roman Senate, while the Emperor Claudius presided over. If my success had matched in any way my high birth and fortune, I should have entered this city as your friend, not your prisoner. You would have counted it an honour to welcome such a well-born ruler of many peoples, and as it is, you take pleasure in my situation. To me, though, it brings nothing but shame. I was rich in horses and men, arms and wealth. Is it any wonder that I was unwilling to lose them? If you Romans chose to dominate the peoples of the world, does it follow that they will all accept their slavery? If I'd have been captured straight away, neither of us would have gained a name for ourselves. If you punish me now, I shall be forgotten. But if you spare me, I shall make your clemency known for all time to come. The speech was so eloquently given that it impressed the emperor so much that he freed Caractacus and allowed him to live the rest of his days in Rome, never returning to his homeland again.